Let's now move on. Viewers, India is experiencing an uptick in COVID-19 cases. Yes, you heard me right. There has been an increase in the number of active cases. It has crossed 1,000 mark. Kerala leads with 430 active cases, followed by Maharashtra with 209 active cases, and Delhi also has got 104 active cases. What is it? Should we be worried? Let's straight away ask our guest who is joining us live right now. We are joined by Dr. Raman R. Gangakhedkar, former head, Division of Epidemiology and Communicable Diseases at ICMR, distinguished professor at Symbiosis International University. Sir, good evening. Thank you very much for speaking with us here on Times Now. I want to first ask you, with over 1,000 COVID cases, active COVID cases in India right now, are we witnessing a new wave of COVID? Is the situation alarming? Should we be worried?
I don't think we should worry as much or panic at this point in time. It is time. Now, if we recall, it's 5 years into the pandemic. The virus is evolving. The virus, if it has to survive, it has to ensure that it is highly transmissible. It means it can ensure that it will quickly transmit itself into another person and try to survive. But the severity and risk of death tends to go down, mainly because when a host dies, the likelihood of this virus also dying tends to increase. So new and newer variants that come, they are essentially likely to have high transmission efficiency. So the numbers tend to be higher. Okay. It is time we don't look at the numbers. The surveillance has to go beyond the numbers itself, because numbers don't mean much now at this stage of the pandemic. What we need to remember is we'll have to look at the people, whether it increases the risk of hospitalization. Okay. Does it increase the risk of death? If the surveillance is directed towards that, we may essentially pick up the kind of variant which may probably be posing a public health problem. At this point, we don't have any evidence to that effect. So there is no reason we should panic. People should not look at the number, because essentially these numbers are perhaps a reflection of rising cases, because the virus is having higher transmission efficiency, but is unlikely to cause a major public health problem.
Okay, you're saying there is no need to panic as of now. So I want to ask you, should we pull out our masks? What immediate steps should India take to ensure that the current situation remains under control and doesn't escalate?
To my mind, the most important thing that we need to do is we have to move away from these numbers. Our surveillance activities should revolve around finding out, is the proportion of people who are infected by COVID or where attribution can be COVID increasing among those who are getting hospitalized and those who are dying, rather than looking at the number of cases where the test turned out as positive. That's the most important lesson that we have to remember, because otherwise the fear and panic will unnecessarily increase in the community. The second thing which is important for all of us is we should disseminate this information to people that COVID is going to be there in the population as an endemic disease. Now, in those circumstances, all those who are vulnerable, when they go outside to meet people in crowds or go in crowds itself or meet somebody who appears to have some respiratory infection, they must follow COVID-appropriate behavior at least. Those who are elderly, those who have chronic morbidity that perhaps makes them more vulnerable to acquire this infection. Beyond that, do we need to worry more? Perhaps not.
Okay, but I also want to ask you, sir, do the vaccines administered during the early phases of COVID pandemic still offer protection against these new variants?
No, vaccines used to protect us from hospitalization and death for which we don't have any evidence that the rate of hospitalization is impacted by these new variants or risk of death is increasing because of these new variants that have been observed. With respect to risk of acquiring infection, all of us must remember that COVID vaccines did not reduce the risk of getting new infections, mainly because that protection did not prevent against the newer variants that was coming, because there is some vaccine-induced pressure which makes the virus ensure that it will survive even in the presence of antibodies that have come because of vaccines.
Okay.
So to me, honestly speaking, I don't think you would require vaccines at this juncture because the outbreak is going to last shorter, for a shorter period. And also that the time that the vaccine will take to protect you from hospitalization is going to be longer than the time the virus will be present, the variant will be present among us. And therefore, we should not panic unnecessarily about it.
I think that's the final word. One should not panic unnecessarily at this point in time. Thank you very much, Dr. Raman, for joining us here on Times Now and getting us your perspective. With this, it's a wrap. Thank you very much for staying with us here on NewsHour Agenda. Heading into a short break, News Now Overnight with Rohit coming up next.